Welcome to Employee Benefit Plans and Business Sense.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of Employee Benefit Plans and Business Sense with Lank and Kathleen Bass over at KLB Benefits Law Group. I'm your host, Mike Leon. And Kathleen, they've been helping employers and benefit plan service providers navigate the complex legal requirements of employee benefit plans. And they've got decades of combined experience in not only employee benefits law, but also in guiding clients through compliance matters, corrections, IRS, and DOL audits. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about plan committees. Dal's going to explain what they are, how they function, and how employers should really start thinking about structuring oversight of their benefit plans. Ladies, it's good to see you as always. Dal, I turn to you because I mentioned you in the intro. What is a plan committee here? I've only heard plan committee from the Office episodes. What is a plan committee? What does it do?
Thank you, Mike. A plan committee is an in-house, inside the employer committee, and a committee can be anybody more than one person, right? 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, a small group of people who have a formal duty as part of their job description to help the employer oversee the plan, help them fulfill all the fiduciary duties we talk about in the ERISA episode. There are many in-house activities that the employer is responsible for, and they also are responsible for overseeing the plan's vendors, the service providers, such as the third-party administrator that we call the TPA, or the registered investment advisor. Maybe the plan requires a financial audit. They have to interact with the auditor. There are all sorts of service providers that are permanent fixtures in the life of the plan sponsor, and that plan sponsor is is probably best served having a committee rather than just one individual in charge of that oversight.
Yeah. Well, it funnels into the follow-up beautifully, which is, you said the word required. Are employers required then to have committee? It doesn't sound like they are required.
Well, they are not required to have a committee. They're required to have those duties. If they have these plans, the duties come with the plans, and they can't get rid of those. But you don't have to have more than one person in charge inside the company. You don't have to have a committee. However, in some companies, it's depending on the company's history, it's important to know if there's been a plan committee in the past. There may be a requirement for a committee to be operating that isn't operating. So if there's a written committee charter somewhere describing a committee's activities and those activities aren't happening, then the committee better get its act together and either terminate that charter and not exist anymore, or do what it's supposed to do.
Right.
And I just was going to add, even though it's not required, having a plan committee is really a best practice. I've seen research on the fact that groups make better decisions than single people. And so a lot of times we'll see an employer who has their HR person just make the decisions, or their busy, CEO or CFO make these decisions. And, part of this, the idea of a plan committee is you've got all these different viewpoints and knowledge base, and kind of having different perspectives. And so it's really a best practice. And, it's super important in a big company that has to manage a lot of benefits. And I'll just say this, a lot of companies that have plan committees for their retirement plan don't have one for their health and welfare plans, and they should. It could be the same committee, but it's, big company can have a plan committee, and a small company can have a plan committee, even if it's just like 2 people. Right. And it's usually generally better to have 2 people or more having input into any decisions.
Yeah, I think my wife would agree with you on that point there, Kathleen. But forget about her for a second.
Committee, right?
Right, exactly. So, but Dal, let me ask you then. So, are there certain situations that you guys have seen where it does make sense for a plan sponsor to establish a committee?
Absolutely, yes. We've had great experience developing a robust committee in a group of employers that participate in one plan. So there's one plan committee, but it's a group of employers because they're all related to one another, and are treated as a single employer for many compliance purposes. So they banded together 15 years ago to participate in a single plan. And there are representatives from each of those EINs that issues that the W-2 payroll for its employees. Each of the participating employer entities has a member on the committee, and that's very, very helpful because it's a group of actually 8 employers, but there's 6 different EINs, and that's very helpful to have this committee in participating. From contributing members from all of the employers. So not every company, of course, has that kind of complexity. The other successful committees that we have seen are committees that have a very rigid or hierarchical structure, top down, where it's helpful to have a little bit more input from the rank and file employees on the plan. And so having a C-suite person is great. A CFO, COO, even CEO participating in the committee is fine, but they get input in a committee. They can get input from an HR representative, a payroll person, even a rank and file person, a supervisor from a department, for example, to get some input from the population about how the plan is operating, how it's perceived, helping share the burden of making decisions. Again, as Kathleen pointed out, just having a group decision is just a much more robust practice.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kathleen.
And I was just going to clarify, Dahl referenced EIN. That's an employer identification number. It's the tax ID number for these plans or these companies that sponsor these plans. And I just want to follow up on what, Dahl was giving that one example of the different employers who operate very separately, except they have this common benefits. And again, a committee is about getting different perspectives. And in this case, having a representative from each location ensures that, it's not one location's like employee dynamic that drives the benefits for the whole group. Everybody has input as to what their employees need. So that's another sort of angle on the idea of it's better to have many perspectives.
Yeah. Well, speaking of those many perspectives, Dal, who should be, you guys have mentioned a few of the roles, but who should be on this committee? Are there roles and departments that are important to include on this?
Yes, I would advise that if there is an HR director or representative of an HR department, there should be that person. Whether that person is just an HR director doesn't matter. If they're the COO, for example, and there is no HR director, that person should be involved in the committee. And someone at the decision level, at least one person in a level of authority to make a decision, to have the kind of authority in the company to allow the committee to make decisions about the plan, and also a diversity of perspectives. Again, getting back to the idea that a group is better than just a single person, a diversity of skills and perspectives is helpful. So somebody who's an accounting or payroll person is helpful because they think about numbers all day. And then it's helpful maybe to have somebody who deals in another aspect of the company's operations, who's in touch with ordinary rank and file employees, a supervisor, for example. They all have input that's valuable. So I think diversity and then some kind of authority. There needs to be, the committee can't just be comprised of low-level employees who then have to go to another person to get permission to do anything. It needs to include in the group a person or people with sufficient authority to make decisions on behalf of the employer.
Yeah. Well, can we expand on authority, because you mentioned it, but once the committee is actually established, where's the authority? What authority can be delegated to them?
That's a good point. Well, the establishment of a committee it should be created in a writing in any document, but so there's no special form that the writing has to take, but it needs to describe what the committee's job is. And so I call that a committee charter. It can be called different things, and it doesn't have to be a huge document, but a list of what the committee's meant to do. For example, meet at least once per year. Not that you would want to require them to meet too often, but you would have a minimum number of meetings, and you would require them to review the plan investments with a professional investment advisor. If you have a plan committee, you should have an investment advisor, a registered investment advisor that's a professional whose job it is to help you choose investments for your plan participants to select for their retirement savings. That investment advisor should be part of the delegated authority should be to interact with the investment advisor to review investment performance and understand the menu for the available menu under the plan and change it as needed. Another aspect of it should be, it doesn't have to be, of reviewing the plan's administrative practices and operations. Just reviewing, for example, how well people are using the plan. Do they like the plan? Is anybody requesting plan features that you don't have that maybe they that the committee should consider adding? And so all of the lists of the possible activities in general should be listed in this charter, not with specific minimum requirements, but just the idea that the committee exists, the people who are on it, the people who are on the committee should know that they're on it. There should be a written acknowledgement of the committee members that they're on this committee, and there should be a basic list of bullet points of what the activities are.
Yeah. Yeah, Kathleen.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, I've seen some plan documents have some general language in them saying, that the plan administrator can delegate to whomever they want these duties. And then they go and set up a plan committee. Sometimes plan documents it just says it's the employer, and you have to specify in the plan document that there's a plan committee. So that varies. And I've also seen plan committees set up by resolution of the board. There needs to be somewhere some delegation of this responsibility to this committee. And then, as Dahl says, a charter is a best practice that really informs the committee what their duties and authority is, as well as lay it out there. And I would say another tip is, sometimes, plan committees, when they set them up, they'll list the people's names. It's, Joe, Alice, and Mark are the plan committee. Well, then the problem is what happens if Mark leaves the company? Then they have to go and do a reauthorization, whereas it's kind of better to set up the plan committee so that, it's going to be, the CEO, the HR director, and the payroll manager. And then that way, then if one of them leaves, the new person in that position will automatically be on the committee. And also another important thing in a charter is how do they decide? Like, do they have to have a simple majority, if there's a disagreement? And then sort of that process, like if someone leaves, how do they appoint someone new? Is it automatic, or do they have to go through a process? So,
yeah. Well, and to piggyback on all of that Kathleen said, Dal, what are some best practices you would advise for maybe employers that are listening to this right now? They want to run an effective plan committee over time. What are some best practices that you guys would advise them of? Dal, I'll start with you.
Once the committee is established, I would suggest that they conduct some training on ERISA for the committee members that are just brief, sort of foundational training knowledge about what their duties are as the committee, as a decision maker in the plan, but also just what are the general rules for ERISA. There's a lot. It's not that you would be able to give them a training in an hour or something, but a steady diet of informative trainings is very, very helpful for all committee members, especially as committees turn over, new members come. They might not have any foundation in ERISA, and so there might be a call for a refresher. And then, of course, we recommend having ERISA counsel present at a committee meeting once in a while, if not regularly, to answer questions about ERISA and answer questions on the spot about their plan. It's very helpful when there's an expert in the room. That expert may be the HR director or somebody else inside the company. But if you don't have that person who's knowledgeable about ERISA and about the plan, then you should get the ERISA counsel involved. And also, I strongly recommend having the registered investment advisor involved in a meeting with the plan committee at least once a year to review investments.
Yeah. Kathleen?
And I just say that it's also ERISA counsel. If we are at a meeting, it's also our opportunity to educate the plan committee on developments in the law, things that might affect their plan the next year, or decisions like new changes in law, and there's new decisions they need to make about what parts of these new laws that are optional they want to actually bring in. So it's just sort of these committee meetings are, again, not just the committee itself, but the other people who advise the committee, having that diversity of not just perspective, but knowledge base, and sharing that and being able to sort of hammer things out as a group. That's really important.
Yeah. Well, ladies, thanks for the time, the insights, explaining all this to the audience as always. Appreciate it, ladies.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
And thank you to everyone out there for listening to this installment of Employee Benefit Plans and Business Sense. If you want some added guidance on structuring or strengthening your plan committee, visit klblawgroup.com right now to connect with Dal and Kathleen and the team. And do me one more favor before you go. Hit like, hit subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.